Good morning, or good afternoon, or good day to everybody who joined today's training webinar of OPC Router with the main topic on the OPC plugins like OPC DA and UA Client and OPC UA Server plugin. Thanks for joining once again. Before we start, so this is, as you know, not a marketing webinar, so it's mainly focused on really giving you some information about how to use the software. So it's really a digital training, a web-based training. Thankfully, my colleague Jan will do the training. I will only give you a short introduction. My name is Thorsten. And for those of you who've never worked with OPC Router or heard not much about the software, I will give a very quick introduction to the tool so that you know what we are speaking about. And after a few minutes, my colleague Jan will take over, share his screen, and give you a live training on the OPC plugins. So the session will be recorded, which means that after the training, you will automatically receive an email including a streaming link to the recorded session. So if you would like to review some parts, or if you would like to share the training with some of your colleagues and friends, you're welcome to do so. During the webinar, the microphone and cameras will stay turned off, just to ensure that we have optimal performance for the transmission of this webinar. But if you should have any questions, technical questions, commercial questions during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat, and we will try to answer the questions through the chat, or even I will read the question to my colleague Jan, and he will answer the question during his live presentation. For any other questions that might appear after the webinar, please feel free to have a look at our OPC Router website, which you find under opc-router.com. And in the menu, you will find a point where you can have a look at our international distributors, so that you will find your local OPC Router expert in your country, in your local time zone, in your local language, and also able to give you pricing information in your local currency. For everything else, you can, of course, always also contact us directly under sales@inrate.de via email. Okay, so let's directly jump into the quick introduction of OPC Router. So what is OPC Router and what is it about? We are, especially I am always speaking about that because the name might be a bit misleading to some people who've never heard about OPC Router, because so the topic, the name includes only OPC and the word router. So people might think that the software only can transfer OPC data, and router might let you think it's a hardware-based gateway or something like this. Both is not the case, even if today we will only speak about the OPC plugins, but there are more than 40 different kinds of plugins and connectors available for OPC Router to, for example, connect your industrial printers, cloud solutions, RFID systems, barcode systems, machines, databases, ERP solutions, and so on and so on. So OPC is a very small but also, of course, important part of OPC Router. And it's, as said, it's not a hardware-based gateway. It's a software-based communication platform. Some of you might know Kepware, for example, as an OPC server. OPC Router is a software platform or communication platform that can connect to additional devices like the ones I've already mentioned before. And it can connect different kinds of shop floor systems. It can connect different kinds of top floor systems. And it also can, of course, connect shop floor to top floor systems and vice versa. So what is the special added value of OPC Router in comparison to other, let's say, gateway solutions or communication tools. I will not go through all of these bullet points, these marketing bullet points on that slide, but there are two topics I would like to raise a bit, because I think they are making OPC Router very special and also very unique on the market today. The first point is really the ease of use. And as you know, every software vendor or hardware vendor will tell you that their tools are pretty easy to use. And I'm sure that most of the tools are really easy to use if you know how to do it. But you might need a special training up front and so on. With OPC Router, it's pretty different, because you have a graphical user interface which enables you to create connections between different kinds of systems just using your mouse by drag and drop. So you really can drag boxes, connect them with arrows to ensure the data transfer, define a trigger by also dragging and dropping boxes. And that's it, and your connection is done. So most of you won't need a training to be able to work with OPC Router, and you will see that in the training that my colleague Jan will give you in a few minutes. So it's really, really pretty simple to use, and no matter what kind of connection it is, if it's connecting, I don't know, maybe an industrial printer to a cloud system, or if it's an OPC data source connected to an ERP solution or SAP solution, it's always the same way to create those connections. So if you know how to create one connection, you can connect any system with OPC Router within a few seconds or a few minutes. So this is the first thing, really the operational simplicity of OPC Router. And the other thing I would like to highlight is really the amount of available plugins. So you might know gateway solutions which offer 3 to 5 different kinds of protocols or connectors, like REST and OPC and maybe Modbus or something like this. OPC Router offers more than 40 different kinds of protocols to diverse systems. And this really makes it pretty unique, because you then only need one easy to use software platform which can connect all your systems you might have in your plant, in your company. So, but if you have any additional questions to this, you can, as said, reach out to your local OPC Router distributor, or send us an email to sales@innovate.de so that we can connect. OPC Router, as said, that we're working through an international distribution channel of OPC Router experts. So we are working together with more than 30 different kinds of different partners and partner companies, preferred distributors of OPC Router, which are covering more than 60 different countries worldwide. So I'm pretty sure that no matter where you are located, you will find an OPC Router expert in your area, in your local time zone, speaking your local language, and being able to send you pricing information in your local currency. If you don't find them on our website, please just also shoot us an email, and we will connect you with your local OPC Router expert. Okay, so OPC Router, this is just a graphic to give you an idea how such data transfers could, for example, look like. So we have some of the available plugins listed here. And OPC Router really is acting as a data hub. So yeah, it's a pity that the animation of that slide doesn't work with our webinar system here. But you might imagine that there, for example, the first data transfer could be there is data coming from the shop floor, from a machine, from any industrial hardware like a CNC machine or plastic molding machines or bacterial testing machines. Or they are already in OPC format coming from a Siemens S7 1500 or any other PLC that are able to speak OPC, or OPC servers like Kepware or Matricon or Softing or whatever. So you have that data coming from the shop floor area, and that should maybe go to the ERP system. Maybe that there's a new production order that has been started, so that information will be sent from the shop floor to the ERP system, and it will take information out of the ERP system. For example, for which information that should be printed on the finished product in the packaging line. So that information will then be sent from the ERP solution directly to the printer. Another use case could be that there's data coming from office systems or from communication systems like emails or Telegram Messenger, or data which is available in Microsoft Excel or in a CSV file, or you would like to send or receive information through Microsoft Teams and so on. That information can go directly from those systems and maybe being sent to a database if that should be needed. Or other use cases could be that you're working with cloud-based solutions, and there should be information also been stored coming from the cloud and should be stored in another database system. So that doesn't need to be a single database. It could be a database based solution, like maybe a maintenance system, which you can connect through ODBC, for example, or OLEDB, or any other kind of database where, like a high volumes database like InfluxDB or MongoDB, where you would like to do reporting and analysis on these values that you receive from the cloud systems. And of course, it works the other way around. So you can also send data from database systems or from scripts or whatever to the cloud and so on. So just for you as an example to imagine which kinds of data transfers can happen in parallel with OPC Router. And I said today the topic will be mainly about connectivity to OPC systems. And OPC Router can act as both an OPC UA or DA, so the classic protocol, UA or DA client, taking data from an OPC server, like, for example, Kepware or Matricon or Softing or whatever. And it also can act as an OPC server. So, for example, information that you have stored in your ERP solution that you receive from your printer, from your RFID system, from your CNC machine, from a database or whatever, and you would like to publish that data as an OPC server to OPC clients, like, for example, to an HMI or to an MES or any other kind of solution that would like to gather that data through an OPC client. So both is possible. And for both examples, you will also find quick videos, short videos on our website. I've put the links here. I'm sure you are not able to read it. If you look on the OPC Router website and you look on the plugin sites for OPC Client and OPC Server, you will find these quick and short videos which explain you how to work with the OPC Server and the OPC Client plugin of OPC Router. But you don't really need to do so, because I will now directly hand over to my colleague Jan, who will explain you our OPC Client and OPC Server plugin right now in his training. So, hello, Jan.
Yes, thank you, Thorsten. First of all, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar today on OPC. So I will start sharing my screen now. So everybody should now see the OPC router configuration.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So as Thorsten already introduced, we will be looking at the OPC functionality of OPC router today, more specifically the OPC UA server and client functionality. So Thorsten already gave an overview about all the different plugins. So when you follow my mouse here, I'm highlighting the OPC UA Server plugin, and then directly below, you will find the OPC Client plugins for UA and DA communication. When having configured the systems, we will create connections using, on the very right side, using the transfer objects. Basically, we will have a look at all transfer objects and their possibilities. And then finally, when scrolling down, the triggers. So there's a set of OPC triggers that can be used. And after that, you should have a general overview of what's possible with OPC router and OPC connectivity. So, but generally, for those who haven't been working with OPC router yet, there is a top menu here where you have some possibilities. First of all, you can import and export projects and then transfer them to different systems. You have a diagnosis. That is basically when for troubleshooting and communication with in-ray technical support. And very quickly, you have some settings here in the extras menu. So here is where you start to do some basic settings in a productive environment, at least, particularly the storage time of transfer data for analysis purposes. So you don't blow up your database. Maybe you would, in a productive environment, set it to 1 week or something. As many of you know, the underlying database system here is MongoDB. So everything, configuration as well as the runtime environment, all data is stored in a MongoDB, installed directly when installing OPC router. You have some messaging. If you have critical connections, if they run into an error, you can get informed by email. You have the certificate management. You can either import certificates, meaning public key encryption from remote servers into the Windows certificate storage, or OPC router certificate storage or management. If you do want to communicate encrypted, you would at least set up one certificate here. So this would generate a public and private key combination using the plus sign. You can have as many as you want. Usually, if using encryption, you would have at least one. And then you have some redundancy settings. We do support redundancy to some extent. So you have a primary and secondary system. And once the primary server goes down, secondary would realize it and then start its own communication. A new feature, store and forward. It's been introduced in the current version 4.25, where for supported plugins, once you lose the connection to the destination, OPC router would store all the values in the local MongoDB, and once the connection is reestablished to the destination system, it would push forward all the data. So the idea is no data loss anymore. This would be to turn on here and licensed. And then you have different strategies here, like enabling storage time or using a gigabyte volume. That's just how it behaves. For dynamic instances, we have regular connection and template instance connections. We have a different database system based on Microsoft SQL Server. We do have a video tutorial on it, so where this is fully covered in case you have questions. And then finally, licensing has changed in version 4.25. So the next interesting point, everything what you do is always organized here in tabs in your working bench. So also of interest could be when you start working with OPC router or you have complex connections, you would enable show transfer steps. This would give you an indication in which order the different steps within a connection are executed. So you usually start, when you start OPC router, you enable show transfer steps. Expert mode, very interesting. getting more and more interesting. I will get back to that at some point during my presentation. Nevertheless, in case I miss it, remember expert mode. This is an option where you have a large set of parameters for many, many plugins where you directly influence OPC routers' behavior. And particularly when speaking about the OPC plugins or functionality in general, that you have a big influence using this expert mode, or can have. Please do not use it in a productive environment, but first of all, contact us in case you have problems, or simply set up a test environment and then just go ahead and use it. Quickly, when I use any plugin, I double click it and it's organized in tabs. Usually any plugin is configured to some extent, and that's it. If you enable it, you will have, for those plugins that are supported, will have this property grid button. So here you find the parameters I mentioned to influence OPC router behavior. So keep in mind, there is an expert mode. And that's basically it. So those are general settings. Everyday work is done with the icons here on the very left side. So we will go through these items here. We will configure source and destination systems. We will create regular connections. We will not do template instances. This is a separate tutorial. We will set our changes or new connections productive. And then finally, look at the runtime environment. OPC router is at the moment split into two different parts. It's the configurations that we see here. Here you set up connections. You finally activate them, and then they're activated in the runtime. So the icons here are the configuration. Once you activate a connection, this is a view on the OPC router runtime, which is running as a Windows service. And then we would simply now start going through the OPC plugins here. I will skip the list. Thorsten already mentioned a lot about the different plugins here. So they are grouped by topic, more or less. We support many, many database systems, I guess. So we will get to know some of them today. And as I said, this is where you set up the connection to your source and destination systems. So in step one, for example, when trying to set up an OPC UA server, you double click on the respective plugin and it would open a tab here and give you a list with all implemented plugins. You can have usually as many plugins as you want. So different OPC servers, different connections to databases, and so on. For the first example, we will set up an OPC server. Usually OPC router is only a client, but when it comes to REST communication or OPC UA communication, we can also act as a server. So when I double click on the entry here, I prepared one example. It would open a dialog. Every dialog looks different depending on the destination system. A database configuration dialog looks different than the OPC server dialog by nature. So, but usually you start for each plugin giving a working name. That name is displayed during configuration working with OPC router. So that's an important name. Then as in general, when creating a connection to an UA server, it's TCP-based communication. So we only support UA communication, and then on this case, of course, you need to specify a certain port. You also can specify a sample rate here. So when you create text and want to share information on your OPC server, this is in which rate the data is refreshed. In this case, I want to communicate encrypted. So I have to set up a certificate. Here I used my client certificate. I can have any certificate here created and use it here. So in this case, I'm using my client certificate that I set up earlier in settings. You can import remote client certificates and store them in the router certificate management or Windows, or you simply accept all client certificate when they try to communicate with you, which I will do now here. Once you have done that, OPC router will create an endpoint address. So this connection string here can now be used by OPC clients in order to connect to OPC router server, to the OPC router UA server. I will not allow anonymous connections. You can do that, but I won't. And then here for the security settings, I will accept non-encrypted communication and then 2 different algorithms based on digital signing and encryption of the messages. So the client can choose whether or not to communicate encrypted when using these settings here. Output data, this is something interesting. OPC router, as many of you know, supports internal variables. In the plugin section here, you find variables that you can create and store information. Very interesting when sharing information across connections. If I have 1,000 connections with an OPC router, they don't know each other. They don't know, connection 1 does not know what connection 2 does. It's a multi-threaded system. That's why you have multiple cores on your hardware side. When sharing information among connections, variables are the choice, as well as for debugging, testing, and checking the output of some transfer objects. So variables are useful, and you can check this checkbox and say, okay, the client should see the variables names and read the values and write to it as well. So you have interaction between OPC clients and OPC router variables. Performance data gives you some internal information about OPC router, the runtime, and so on. We will see that later. It can maybe be useful depending on the project. I would just leave it here now. So you have basically global variables as well as internal tags if you want. So I type in, I have a certain structure. It usually starts with an entry point, an object. So I will have a topic. In this case, I will give clients production data. So OPC UA client should be able to access and read current production data. You basically type in here the name. For example, another tag would be current scrap, and then you specify the data type or what it is. Many of you know OPC UA specification gives a lot of object types. This is a list of the currently supported types. So for example, we are not supporting structures yet. When browsing a PLC from Siemens maybe or something, then you will find structures as well. We're developing the OPC UA server functionality. At the moment, this is what we support. So basically you have an object, you have different folders to structure your data, and then the data items themselves. So those are OPC UA variables. And in this case, untype might not be good. It's an integer value. You don't have to type it in. You can also save it, the structure, or to an Excel file, fill in the structure in Excel, and then load it in here. So this would be a help instead of typing everything in here. You should set up a folder for methods. You can have different folders, as many as you want, but at least one. That becomes clear later. You shouldn't have a flat hierarchy. So at least have one, when testing it, set up one folder for methods. Okay, finally, you have user management. You can set up different users. In this case, I said no anonymous logon, so the OPC clients will have to provide user credentials. At the moment, only manually, by manually setting them up. So there's no import of users. And then you can specify what the users are allowed to do when connecting to internal OPC router UA server. So I have one OPC router user here. And that's basically it. Encryption, user settings, and the structure itself. Once you have done that, you say, okay, yeah, and that's it. Now, if you publish your settings here for the plugins and say go productive, OPC router would start working. So that's it. I have no connections here whatsoever, only plugin settings. And now here, once the service is running, the green lamp, I can copy my connection string here. And it should work. So now I will use some UA client, go here, add a connection. So my connection string is here. I fill it in. Yeah, this should be supported encryption because I checked the checkboxes. And then I have my password for the user and say, okay. So now I have the settings here and I say connect. Now this client wants me to trust the server certificate that I created. So I trust it and say continue. And then I'm connected. And it gives me all my internal variables of OPC router. Maybe I can just drag it here. Okay, the value is null. It's an object, but it's the list of variables here. And then further, I have the OPC tags, some performance data, and then my object, my root object, if you want, production data with all respective tags that I created here. And those tags can be used red because I do have the user rights. So obviously they are 0, but I can also type in 23. Now the value on my OPC server is 23. So you can interact with it, of course, the same way as you're used to it. And then, that's the basic functionality, variables and tags. You can also connect to your own OPC server here. So for example, we don't have methods here and we don't have a connection from our OPC router to our own server. If you want to interact with your own UA server, you need to go to connections. This is where you transfer data from A to B. So I will now say, I create a new folder and say OPC server. So here, within that folder, I create a new connection, client connection. When creating connection, it's always also organized in tabs. So before I can connect to my own UA server, I have to specify it here as UA client. So I say here, go to plus, and then it's router OPC server. My connection string is the one I copied. And I say highest security setting should be okay. Anonymous logon is not okay. I need to specify the user. And once you have done that, check connection. You're fine, connection established. So From the other perspective, the client perspective, you supply an endpoint URL, define encryption, possibly the settings for the user, and that's it. And finally, of course, the sample rate, the most critical value. You can have as many connections to the same server if you want, as you want, using different sample rates. But that basically is how much pressure you put on the system. So if I have 1,000 variables using this plugin, the OPC client tells the OPC server to pull that information from the devices every 500 milliseconds. So this is, of course, the most important value here. But that's it. Now I have a connection to my own OPC server. And now, creating a connection, I have my client connection. And here, for the first time, when creating connections, we use transfer objects up here. I will now have, for the OPC connection here, the CAP server EX as a second server. I will read data from there and transfer it to my internal server. It's the same way. So I have here some, it can be any OPC server, but I have here some simulation examples and machine data where I have some production data. And I want to transfer the current amount and maybe current temperature from this one OPC server to my internal machine, the internal OPC router UA server. So in my connection, I read data from the CAP server EX and I write it to my internal server. This is how you access it. So quickly, I go to what OPC server, I go to tech browser, I read data from machine 1. Let's say current data. And okay. So, and then I will write it to my internal OPC router server. And when I browse it, I have the same structure, of course. So when I link those, this is one example how what a connection could look like. You usually have 2 transfer objects at least. You can here show transfer steps, then there is no number. And that's helpful. This is the order in which it's executed. And it's just the arrangement. If I had another transfer object, database, for example, it gets the 1. If I move it down, it's 3. So depending on the position, the transfer steps are arranged here. That's how you influence it. Finally, I need a trigger. For example, as a very easy trigger, for this example, I use a time trigger. And I say, yeah, every 3 seconds, I want to synchronize the 2 OPC servers. And then I go to set productive. I can also do it here or as a shortcut in my connection. And when I do it, it's copied over to the runtime environment. Now, with the last option here, I'm looking at the runtime environment. So at some point, it should start. Okay, that took some while. And now it's starting. So every 3 seconds, I read the data from the one OPC server and transfer it over to the internal OPC router or UA server. And when we look at the UA expert, we see, since we are connected to our OPC router server, we see the values changing as well. So basically, you set up your server connectivity, you create a connection to that server, and then you can use it with any transfer object here or trigger OPC-wise here. That's it, nothing more. Finally, there's one thing that we support when it comes to the UA specification. We have alarms and events. We have structures, and so on. At the moment, we do support methods. From the client side to the server, It's OPC method calling, as well as creating your own methods server side. So if OPC server wants to offer a method, you go here, say new connection, OPC method. So server side, I do create a method using a trigger. The logic is we receive data. That's why it's in the trigger section here. So now I say, okay, of course, it's my internal server. The server pass. I created a folder for methods. That's why you do it. You can have topic-wise as many as you want, but at least one. So keep that in mind. You specify the name of the method, get total amount. I want to calculate something. And then, gets the total amount. That's not important. This is just a description. And here you specify input and output parameters. So I say we have a current amount, which is of type integer, and current scrap, which is also of type integer. And I want to add the two values. And then in return, the client should get the result. As a very simple example. That would be the total amount. And maybe also total amount message as string. So the client would supply the information here, and we do the calculation and the callback. So for that purpose, very interesting. If you don't want, you can program anything yourself using C#. You can program your own transfer objects or triggers for very basic, or not only basic calculations, for easy, quick calculations. In the basic license covered is the calculator. So here now I do some two input parameters. First one is current amount, and the second one is current scrap. And then I just double click them, current amount plus current scrap. But it doesn't cover only the simple mathematical operators, but also many mathematical functions here, also like string operations and so on. So the calculator is possibly very powerful and a nice helping tool. So now I just add the two values. Of course, I have to supply them. Either what you do is you do drag and drop, as I did before, or you use the options here, automatic matching by name. So I create multiple connection once and say current amount, and OPC router should do the rest. Maybe I did something wrong here, but current amount. Okay, usually it should create the two nodes here. So for large objects, that's interesting. And then the output value is my return value to the client, total amount. Or what you also can do is you can create a string here using a text replace quickly, maybe. So the value is of type string, and then the value is, and then you double click the input parameter as a variable here, and okay. So now I can put in the value and the complete string back here. So there are many options of helping tools here. And now when I activate it, now that method is implemented server side, so it's red here in the runtime environment, but at some point this bar should turn green, which is the case now, so it's up and running. And now if I go here, and maybe I have to reconnect. No, that is not good. I have to say okay, and connect. So password is, and I trust it. So now when refreshing, or maybe automatically, the methods folder now has an entry, my get total amount method that I just implemented here. And then again, you can, with any client, you should be able to call methods. So my current amount is 111 plus 1 maybe. And then I say call, and then it counts the two values and creates the string. So on OPC router side, you see an entry here for a transfer as always, and then the values that were calculated, that were transferred for analysis purposes. So we don't have only variables in OPC text, but also methods using the OPC router method here. And if you want to call a message on your own OPC server, of course, that would be the same. You say, and then you use this one. Here, I have my internal server, and in return, I get my production data and all methods. So OPC router can also call its own methods. So important is that when using OPC server functionality and interacting with it, you need the server as well as the client functionality. But that's the same then. Okay, so I will deactivate the connection. I don't need it. That would be the server side, the possibilities and how we interact with it. If there are no questions, I will then continue using the client side in more detail. So OPC Client. Here, for the first example, I will do a new connection. OPC data access. As I already showed, you can have a data access here. When reading or writing values as a client, regular values, you can simply specify the server, browse the data, choose the data that you want. For example, read the current amount and the current temperature and apply. This information can then be stored anywhere. You can shoot it into a database. For this purpose, I will put it into a variable of type object, so no data type. I will quickly copy it. This is how you see the output of a transfer object. That's helpful from time to time. So OPC data access is basically you have a large set of OPC items that you want to transfer somewhere. There's no limitation whatsoever regarding the number of transfer objects or type. I can combine MQTT with Apache, SAP, Excel, Euromap, no limitations. And as many as you want. Only the position makes a difference. So this is OPC data access, basically. You transfer data. Okay, in this case, I would maybe need a trigger. So first of all, I use a data change trigger. Whenever the value of current amount changes, I want this connection to be triggered. I can also say, okay, I will have a link between the triggers by OR. So you can have as many triggers as you want, but they are always linked by either AND or OR. Okay, I have to do that. And then maybe, maybe turn this. Okay, I don't have the metadata here. So now I have two triggers, connect by OR, and once I start it, they would simply read the values and transfer them. So that would be the easiest example for data access. OPC methods is the one, I basically showed you. You can have here a method where you call a method. We don't have structures at the moment, but once you have a Siemens PLC or any other vendor who supports structures, then you can simply use it. You will browse a structure, and in return, you get a set of data fields. So, yeah. And then finally, maybe of interest, I prepared an example for OPC messages. That's our own creation, if you want, for secure data transfer. So the idea is some handshaking. First of all, I have to specify the server that I want to communicate with. I'm using my CAP server again. And then you have two tabs up here. First of all, sending to the server. The send data point is the handshake value. OPC router will count up each message by +1. So when I send a message, they will write into this integer 32 data field a 1. When I send data again, it's a 2, and it will automatically increment that counter. I will send data to the fields I specify here. And in return, I can get a value or a data field as a response. So I will send a message to the server, and it's maybe message number 1. The server side then implements some logic, gets all the data, and answers me in another OPC item with the same number. If the numbers are equal, I know message was received correctly. So first of all, I will have to specify, I set up an example here. So I have a send input integer 32 value, and then I send my information to the server. And in return, the OPC server will answer me with the same number in the receive value. That's the idea for securely sending data. Because first of all, the items are here, the message is written, and then the handshake counter is set, as counted up. This way you can be sure that the data you want to send is written to the OPC server, and thus the PLC, for example. So for secure handshaking, that message was created. Okay, so the send data point will be a message transfer. Send. I send data here into that point. I choose the tech browser for, and then the data fields itself here. Oh no, that was not correct, I think. Just a second, maybe I did it wrong here. Send, apply. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay, now it does it. And then tech browser here should be okay. Yeah, I sent the data for amount and temperature here. Apply. Yeah, okay. Okay, it does it. And then I receive maybe some data here. And in the receive field. And I could also specify further data. So the server side could also write values. In this case, I have an acknowledge bit maybe. So any other data can be added. So yeah, that would be it. I will now send some data using OPC data access from the CAP server X, again using temperature maybe. Current amount, current temperature. And okay, that's why. Okay. So I put the temperature here and the amount there. And that's basically it. So now I set it productive. I will not use a trigger here because so oh, that's not good. Oh. I mismatched it here. Example. So set it productive. And here, once it's green in the bar here, which should be the case directly, yes, I trigger it manually. So here, when I trigger it, there's no transfer because it's waiting. The transfer is not completed. When I look at the values, I send the send handshake to 1, the counter, and the values themselves. Now the server side implements the logic. Did it receive all the values? If so, it would answer me with the same number, 1. And if so, OPC router has a transfer. It waits for the response. If it doesn't get it in time, or the number here is different than to the request number, then you get an error message. So the numbers for the handshake need always to be the same. And you can be sure that the information itself that you want to send, recipe parameters, order data, whatever, is written first. So this is a OPC message is a construct, an idea of InRate to securely, by handshake, transfer information between OPC servers and client. Yeah. By the way, I misconfigured something. If you do use browse pass, you get a complete path to the OPC item. Usually, I think you would use the node ID in the OPC UA client plugin, because then it looks somewhat different. An OPC data access would then, as you usually see, I think, look like this. This should be the preferred way to do it. For example, maybe these here. And then you only get the name. And then name matching here is also possible. So node ID would be the first choice. For some reason, I changed it. Okay, so yeah, we have all the values here. Finally, we have some different kinds of triggers. So I will quickly give you an example what the differences are. It's usually always the same. If I do data change here, no, it should do it. Yeah, I have the possibility to do a data change trigger, as we used before. I specify an item, and once that item changed, it would trigger the disconnection. But it can more. It can do even more. It can be not only look at one specific item. For example, if you want to have the current temperature, you have the output of metadata here. So not only that it would trigger the connection, but in return, it gives you the value and some more metadata information that can be used then for any other objects. For example, I can now put it into a database by an insert, my training database. I have prepared one table, and that's it. And then you can do the matching here and so on. Doesn't matter where to put it. So data change trigger or multi-data change trigger, which is looking at a certain path. So in this case, not only one OPC item, but all values within current data. So now it would trigger if any of those values changes within that folder current data and forward the information. So if you have 1,000 items in that folder, you can cover 1,000 OPC items with one connection. Data change and multi-data change are often used for sensor values, physical measurements, mass data collection, thousands of connections. Because they work by subscription, OPC router subscribes for all the items on the OPC server side, and then the OPC server will send the push messages back to OPC router when the value changes. So no polling, but subscription. Performance-wise, a very good choice for if you have many, many connections. On the other hand, you have, for example, the message trigger. That one works by polling. So it's, first of all, it's integer based. I have an integer value for messaging. If that value changes, then OPC router will be informed if you will realize it and trigger the connection. But OPC router is constantly polling this integer value and then comparing the last value in its local cache with the new value. Once it changes, it will trigger. So this is for very secure communication. We have the message client, secure data transfer from client to server, and then the message trigger, secure information transfer from server to client, both working with polling. So bit methods, bit threshold message are working by polling, data change, multi-data change by subscription. And then finally, what we don't have implemented yet, at some point you will have alarms and events. We do not support it, and I don't have a alarm or an event-based OPC UA server at the moment, but once you choose a certain type of event that is implemented on the OPC UA server side, in return you get some values once the event or the item takes place. Then OPC router will be informed by subscription and at the same time get the information of the event. And in the future, we will also cover alarms, which basically is an event, but with a possibility to acknowledge an event. So this is something we would have to look at a later point of time. But at the moment, we do support events. And if you want to do alarming, so acknowledge an event, you can always use a method call here to acknowledge it. But as I said, that will be implemented in the future. Then not only events, but also alarms and events. So yeah, that would be all the triggers and client transfer objects. So I hope I could give you an overview about the functionality, and I think we can switch to question and answers then.
Thank you very much, Jan. We try to answer all the questions directly into the chat. So there are no real questions to answer right now. And we are also, I think, about 3 minutes already over the time because of my long introduction. So thanks again for everybody's interest in today's training and for your patience. Just a quick reminder of the upcoming free OPC router training webinars. You can register to them on our website. So next topics. So today it has been about the topic of OPC. Next month we will speak about CSV files. Then we will have a special tips and tricks event. And then in September, then connectivity to printers, scripting examples, also printer connectivity in more detail, how to work with REST and cloud systems, and ERP connectivity. So you might see a difference between those long-term or webinars, which will take about 1 hour, and the tutorials these tutorials will really cover real use cases in about 15 minutes. So these are short webinars for special use cases, like how can I transfer CSV files into CSV data into a database, explained in 15 minutes. And the other ones, which are not called tutorial, they are about 60 minutes, as the session we had today. There's one question: if if the recording will be shared. Yes, it will. So that's something I mentioned in the beginning. Everybody who registered to these webinars will automatically receive an email after the webinar, including a streaming link of the recording, so that you can review the session again. Okay, so to not take any more of your time, thank you very much for your interest. As said, if you should have any questions, have a look at opc-router.com and find your local distributor in your local language, your local time zone and local currency. And for any other questions which we were not able to answer today or which might come up afterwards, please feel free to shoot a quick email to sales@inrate.de, and we will be happy to connect with you and answer your questions directly. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good time, stay healthy, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.